Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to today's session. Our session today is titled First Timers at EA Global. So this session is a brief overview of how to get the most out of EA Global and provides an opportunity to meet with other first-time attendees. Feel free to drop in or out at any point throughout the session. Use it as it is most helpful to you. So we have two great speakers today. Our first speaker is Zershaaneh Qureshi. She's an AI strategy researcher at Convergence Analysis, and she became active in EA after a career shift in 2023. Before this, she worked at a for-profit company where she researched and consulted on market dynamics in the global water industry and helped to organize international conferences. Our second speaker is Darnell. She's a community liaison at the Center for Effective Altruism. Before joining the community health team, Charlotte worked on the events team and has also worked on various community building projects outside of CEA, such as EAGxOxford 2022, UK High School Outreach, and University Group events. So as a reminder, if you have questions for the speakers, you can submit them via the Swapcard app, and I will select a mixture of prepared and audience questions to ask our speakers. And there will also be office hours for the speakers in Aurora 16 right after this session. So without further ado, let me invite our two speakers, Zershaaneh and Charlotte, to share their talk.
Thank you. Hi everyone, it's great to welcome you to your first EAG. So those of you who have just joined, if you're sitting towards the back, I'd encourage you to come in a little bit, sit next to people. This is going to be an interactive session, so it would be great if you were sitting near people that you can talk to. Right, so this session is targeted at newcomers to EAG, and Charlotte and I are going to be leading the session. So shall we start with some introductions?
Yeah, so I'm Charlotte, hey, and I used to work on running a lot of events like these, and now in my current role, I attend a lot as like a support person, so I've got a pretty good sense of some of the issues people can run into and general thoughts that attendees have had from attending conferences. So I'll do my best to share my knowledge from that.
And I'm Zershaaneh, and 4 months ago I was you. I was sitting just like you are now at my first ever EAG. And even though I'd been to a few conferences before, I remember being both very excited and very nervous at this point. So I can imagine how some of you might be feeling right now. But ultimately, I got a lot out of my first EAG. It really gave me direction, it gave me confidence in my new role, and ultimately it set me up to be here today talking to you guys. So we're just hoping that through this session, we can also set you up to get the most out of your EAG. So, what is this session about? Well, as we've said, we're going to be giving you some tips to get the most out of your EAG. But we're not just going to be talking at you this whole session. This is firstly an interactive session, so we're going to be doing some goal setting together. You're going to be talking to the people next to you. And secondly, this is already a chance to connect with other people in this room who might be in a similar position to some of you. The hope is that by the end of the session, you'll come out of here having already made some of your first connections at EAG. Okay. So, what we're going to cover today is we will tell you a bit about what EAG is. We'll give you a whistle-stop tour of what's going on at EAG. Then we'll give you advice on a few key things. That includes goal setting, networking and one-to-ones, and also how to look after yourself while you're here. We'll have a few final reflections, and then in whatever time is remaining, we'll have a few minutes of Q&A. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to cover every single aspect of EAG in this one session. So what you can do is you can go to Swapcard and take a look at the attendee guide that's linked there for any information that Charlotte and I might not manage to cover in today's session. And also, if you have any questions about what we've talked about today or about the conference in more general, or you just want to chat to us, please come along to our office hours, which are immediately after this talk in Aurora 16.
So we've talked a bit about what this talk is supposed to be, but what is EAG supposed to be? And EAG is basically just about bringing together a network of altruistically minded people so that they can share ideas and research and find collaborators, so that people can ask difficult questions and get support finding out answers to those. And solving some of the world's hardest problems really is quite hard, so we really care about people making actual connections that they can reach out to suggest opportunities, to suggest hires, and to work together in future.
So you might also have noticed at this point that EAG is a little different to many other conferences out there. My background coming into my first EAG was that I'd been to quite a few industry conferences, and those were pretty formal. They were generally oriented around business meetings, and really that's not what EAG is about. So first of all, the atmosphere here is quite relaxed, and what that looks like is there are no expectations for you to be dressed in a particular way, and there are also plenty of opportunities for casual conversation if that's the kind of thing that you're after. Also, something to bear in mind is that when you're talking to people here, the interactions you can expect aren't going to be solely transactional. So if you're someone who's new to EA or to the working world in general, and maybe you're worried that you don't have anything to directly offer the person that you're trying to talk to, please don't worry about that. Please don't let that stop you from reaching out to that person. Ultimately, people are here to share their knowledge and to have these conversations and answer your questions. So I would encourage you to go for it, be curious, ask questions, but also be prepared to change your mind in light of new evidence. This is a learning experience.
So, yeah, what are the different things you have to choose from to attend at this conference? There's a lot on. So I'd really, really encourage you to think carefully and only attend things that are actually interesting or useful for you. Don't feel pressured to attend something just because you think you should. I think on the next slide there is a list of different content, which I'll get started talking about.
Yeah.
So we have lots of talks, which are kind of like this, with someone sharing information with some questions at the end, and often followed by office hours. But there are things like workshops, which are a bit more interactive, where either you'll talk to other attendees more or get a chance to work on things together during the session. For more social things, there are meetups and speed meetings where you can meet lots of other people at the conference. Sometimes these are organized by certain interests like AI safety or aquatic animal welfare or parents or people of color. So you can find a group that works for you. And tonight, you may want to check out the organization fair, where you can go and speak to a number of EA organizations about what they're working on, what they're looking for in new hires, and just any questions you have about the work they do. Now, we'll talk about this a lot throughout the talk, but one-on-ones are a really major part of EA Global. And so I would make sure you save yourself enough time to engage in a number of those, but we'll come back to that later. Now, in addition to all of that, there's also plenty of social things going on. There is an unofficial satellite events doc, which is created by members of the community, where they share different social things that are happening around the conference. There are some spontaneous encounters, which is where you can go and just meet people whenever you have a bit of free time. And I think that's in Aurora Ballroom 1 to 7 and 11. If that's not enough, you can also check out the Spontaneous Happenings channel on Slack, and there are events on Swapcard to help you find people to go to dinner with.
So now that we've talked about what's going on in general at EAG, let's talk now and think a bit about your EA Global. And I want to reiterate here, this event is yours. So you need to think about how best to use it to achieve what you would like to achieve. And what I would really recommend here is that you get specific about what it is you want to achieve while you're here. Now, your goals might look pretty different to the person sitting next to you, and that's okay. There's a lot that you might want to get out of this conference, so to help your thinking, let's take a look at some examples of goals and how you might design your conference to achieve them. So some of you might be students, or you might be looking for your first or your next role in EA, and in that case, one potential rough goal might be something along the lines of, I want to work out what the next best career steps are for me. But we can get a bit more specific than this. So let's think about what specific outcomes do you want to be working towards at this conference? And as one example, maybe your ideal outcome is something like you get hired for a cool new job. In that case, to design your conference around that, what you could be doing is going to the organisation fair and aiming to talk to as many people as you can there and get their advice about applications. Or you could even be setting aside a couple of hours while you're here to actually send out some applications. On the other hand, maybe an ideal outcome for you is that you resolve your uncertainties about how to do the most good. And in that case, I'd really encourage you to seek out people to have one-to-ones with who are looking at an area that you're weighing up about whether you want to be doing work in that area and talking to them about the specific uncertainties you have. Here, it's really important to think to yourself, what is it that I'm actually choosing between? What are my options? And what information do I need from these people to help me progress in making that decision? Now, the examples that I've just given were both sort of targeted at people who are looking for their first or their next job in EA. But that might not be you. It definitely wasn't me. At my first EAG, I just started working in my current role as an AI strategy researcher. And because of that, my goals looked pretty different to those. So they were oriented around leveling up in my current job, in my current position. And what that looked like for me, the specific goals that I was setting myself, surrounded building my network in that field and talking to people who were doing similar types of research to me and getting input on the direction of my research from them, and also sussing out opportunities to collaborate with people. So if you are someone who is already working on a project, and in that case, what a good goal could potentially be would be maybe to talk to as many people as you can about that project and either get their advice or even find people who can help you with some part of it. Another thing that I used my first EAG for was as an opportunity to practice communicating my ideas to people and also refining them as I did that. And potentially those could be great goals for you too.
So a quick note that I think you should really try and be ambitious about what you can achieve at EA Global. These are real outcomes that we've had for people attending the conference, and they actually happen surprisingly often. Obviously, they won't happen for everyone, and it depends a bit how much you plan and who you manage to speak to. But I really would aim high in what you're trying to achieve at the conference.
Right. Now that we've talked a bit about goals, we've got an exercise for you. So we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and we want you to think about your goals and write them down. And here's an exercise to help you with that. So I want you to imagine it's Tuesday morning, you've woken up after the conference, you've had a bit of time to rest, you look back over the weekend that you had, and you say, yeah, EAG went really well for me. What happened in that scenario? Write down what the key events or outcomes that you achieved over the weekend were that made you think it went really well. So we'll give you 5 minutes for that.
And after that 5 minutes, we'll give you a chance to talk to the people around you and meet each other.
All right, everyone, that's 5 minutes. So what we're going to do next is we're going to give you some time to talk to the people next to you about your goals. So what you can do here is you can tell each other what goals you've set for yourself, talk them through why you chose them, and maybe ask each other questions about them. Right? Enjoy.
Okay, it's so nice to see you all connecting, and hopefully you've made some connections that you can follow up with or catch each other in the lunch queue. We're going to keep going with the presentation for now, but hopefully there'll be a bit more time at the end for you to chat, and if you want to use our office hours as a place to chat more, that's totally okay. Cool. So I've mentioned one-on-ones quite a few times now, and so now is the info dump of how to make the best of them. So what actually is a one-on-one? One-on-one is basically just a 25-minute meeting with usually one other person. Swapcard now has actually introduced the function where you can organize group meetings, but the default here tends to be a one-on-one meeting. Now, how do you find people to meet with? There is an attendee button on Swapcard, and you can search and you can filter by things like area of interest, area of expertise. You can look at people's career stages. You can look at where people are based and see what makes sense for you. Now, if you're a bit like me and you'd actually rather just look at a spreadsheet and Control F for certain keywords, you can also do that with something called the attendee data sheet, which is also linked on Swapcard. Now, one really key bit of advice that I don't think I can repeat enough is that I really would encourage you to be ambitious, reach out to lots of people. Many people here just decided to come to EAG, they want to give their expertise, they want to help other people, and so as Zershaaneh said earlier, even if you're not exactly sure what you can give to them, it's definitely still okay to reach out. It is worth noting that people are busy and it can be really difficult to navigate events like this, and so something that can be really helpful is being really specific in your profile and in the message that you send to people, and then that can help them decide who is best to meet with. Now, as I said, people can be really busy, so I would advise trying not to be too disheartened if not everyone responds to your request. It's usually not personal. There are literally 1,400 people here, and they definitely can't meet with everyone. But also, just bear in mind that you should let them triage their time. Don't block yourself from something. You should ask, and then they can choose if it makes sense for them. And you should also bear that in mind for yourselves. Your time is valuable too. Make sure you accept meetings that you think will be interesting or useful, or that you think you might be able to help someone else. And you should also bear this in mind with content as well, deciding between one-on-ones and which content will be the most useful for you. So I mentioned being specific. We're now going to do a little exercise where you send out at least one one-on-one request. I've put some examples up here of how you might be specific. And it's totally okay if being specific is actually that you're not really sure why you want the one-on-one. I've occasionally reached out to people and been like, hey, I think we have similar interests. It'd be great to chat. And that's okay. That gives them an idea of what to expect from the one-on-one. So we're going to spend a bit more time now, I think about 5 minutes, see how we get on, giving you a chance to make sure you reach out to at least one person. Cool. Without further ado, let's do it.
All right, I think we will move on with the session now. We hope this has been a useful exercise, but we know we haven't given you lots of time, and we'd really encourage you to, come along to our office hours if you want to talk about it, and also just spend some more time this evening or tomorrow sending out more meeting requests. Right. Now that we have done this exercise on reaching out to people, I want to give some advice about how to make the most out of your one-to-ones. And the first piece of advice is to take notes during your one-to-ones. Now, if you're like me, everything is just going to blur together in your mind after a long day of meeting people and learning new things. So what I like to do is take some notes during the meeting where possible, and then set aside a proper chunk of time, about half an hour after that meeting, to clean up those notes properly, reflect a bit on what you learned, write down any points that you want to follow up on, and also just take a bit of a breather in between things that you're doing. Second piece of advice is to block out times that you're unavailable in your Swapcard calendar, and you can do this by navigating to My Event and then My Meetings and then clicking on Manage Availability. This is great for blocking out periods of time where you don't want to be disturbed. It's a great way of kind of setting aside time for taking notes in between meetings or taking breaks and things like that. And bear in mind here that Swapcard will block out times automatically for one-to-ones that you've got scheduled in, but it won't block out the times automatically for sessions that you've clicked that you're attending. So you might want to manually block in times for those things, for example, or for lunch breaks that you want to take. The third piece of advice is basically, looking back at my first EAG, was pretty nervous about a few of my one-to-ones. At times, I didn't really know what to say. I was very new to things, so I kind of didn't know what I should be talking about in some cases. And in that case, it really helps to have some questions prepared in advance. And a good way of coming up with those questions is probably looking at the goals that you've set and relating those questions to those specific goals. But if your goals don't kind of naturally lend themselves to obvious discussion points, or if you just run out of things to say, there are plenty of quite standard questions you can fall back on, which are likely to move the conversation along in a productive and interesting way, kind of regardless of the context. And I've got some examples of fairly generic questions up there for you to take a look at. And it's totally fine to be asking questions that aren't like super specific and super insightful. It's okay to be asking quite standard things at times, just to like kind of, keep the conversation moving and see where it takes you. My favorite one of the questions on this list is the last one, which is asking the person you're talking to recommend other people for you to speak to on that topic, because they might have a bigger network than you, so this is a great resource for finding out your next steps for achieving your plans at EAG. And then, last piece of advice here is to please remember to follow up on the things that you have told people you're going to follow up with them on. It's so easy to forget to do that with everything that's going on. You'll be meeting so many people, you'll be making so many plans, but it's so important to do this. It's one of the best ways to really solidify a connection after you meet someone and make sure that they remember you and that you stay in touch and you do the things that you have said you're going to do. So what I would recommend here is that you actually set a reminder in your calendar to remind you to do this, maybe a couple of days after the conference, just so that you don't forget to do this.
So there really is a lot going on, and I'd just like to take a sec to encourage you to really look after yourself at the conference. You might be surprised, but a lot of the times in feedback forms, people are like, oh, it was great, but I definitely didn't eat enough, or I didn't drink enough, or I got really, really tired. Might sound obvious, but make sure you take time for yourself to do all of those things. Take breaks. I personally really like getting outside the venue for at least half an hour, just go on a bit of a walk, be in the outside world for a bit. Maybe you want to take a nap, there's a nap room for that, or a quiet work room if you need to get some things done. If you have any questions, you can ask a volunteer. They're usually in a blue t-shirt or they have a volunteer name badge. And if you have any issues or any interpersonal problems, or you just need someone to talk to about something hard, you can contact our community health contacts. We've got some lovely people called Julia and Ruth, and they're really happy to just be a supportive ear. You can find out how to contact them in the attendee guide, but also if you search their names in Swapcard, you can message them that way. So one other thing to bear in mind, it's not just looking after yourself physically or if you have specific problems, just EAG can be a lot. There's lots of different ideas, lots of, problems that we're facing. And so I try and keep in mind this Venn diagram from Our World in Data, which hopefully you've seen before, but you might not have. I try and take a bit of time to think about how, yes, the world is really awful and there are so many problems that need solving. It is way better than it used to be, and also it can be much better. And so I try and take a minute and look around at the conference and think about all the people who are, working really hard to try and improve those things.
Some really valuable thoughts from Charlotte there, and I'd encourage you all to be looking after yourself physically and emotionally while you're here. So hopefully this session has prepared you for getting the most out of this EAG. We're aware that we haven't given you loads of time to do some planning and sending out meeting requests and so forth. So as we've said, please do try to take some time to do that tonight or tomorrow, just to really set yourself up as best as you can to have a really good EAG. Now, before we end the presentation and move on to our Q&A, I just have a few final reflections I'd like to share. And the first of these is that there's no right way to do EAG. We have given you some tips here, but ultimately everyone has very different needs and different dispositions. And it's okay if your EAG looks very different to someone else's. That doesn't mean it was any less successful. Secondly, we set some goals here today, but it's really okay if those goals aren't static. You could very well pause midway through the conference and really reevaluate the goals that you've set. And in fact, it might be a good thing to update your direction and your opinions based on the evidence that you found here at EAG. It is a learning experience, and we encourage you to be open to having your mind changed while you're here. Lastly, I just want to say that it's okay and understandable if you are apprehensive now or at any point during the conference. I was certainly quite nervous for my first EAG, but I learned really quickly that people really just want to talk to you and they want to share their knowledge. So yeah, with that in mind, just go for it, embrace all of the opportunities that EAG has to offer, and good luck, and welcome to EA Global.
So we'll take a few minutes of questions now, and then if you have more questions, we can head over to our office hours.
Or come along to our office hours where you can ask us any questions as well.
Covered a lot of what to do. Anything that we shouldn't do? Is there certain things that we ought not do? Like get too rambunctious?
Great question. So in case you couldn't hear that, the question was about if there are things that you shouldn't do at EA Global. I guess there are a few. One thing is pushing yourself too hard. I know some people who do back-to-back one-on-ones all day Saturday, all day Friday, and then by Sunday they're just dead. And so I would really encourage not doing that if you don't think you can make it through. I would also just try not to take interactions too personally, be really kind and really empathetic about what people might be going through, and just remember that everyone's having a pretty busy day. What else?
Yeah, I would reiterate some of the things you said, and something else that springs to mind is don't force yourself to attend something just because it sounds like it's a good idea to do it and other people have told you that it would be a good idea to do it. I want to reiterate here that it's completely up to you what you want to get out of this, and if something just doesn't sound like it's your bag, then it's completely reasonable to not go.
Okay. Given you had a great time talking to each other earlier on, I'm inclined to say, if you want, you can use the last 5 minutes to chat to each other a bit more, maybe talk to some people you weren't sat next to, and then we can head over to office hours if you have more questions. Thanks very much, and welcome to EA Global.